And we're back. Generations, talking about my sports generations. So if you caught our last show, we had a special guest that joined us, and he pretty much accused Scott Foster of being corrupt. No, not pretty much. He accused Scott Foster, the referee in the NBA, as being corrupt, especially with the recent allegations and the circumstantial evidence around Scott Foster that ties him to the infamous referee Tim. Is it Donaghy or Donaghy?
I think the G is silent. Donaghy, I believe.
Donaghy. But as always, your hosts for this show, I am Jonathan.
I'm Steve.
And we got another great show for you. But first off, Steve, do you want to talk about our listener appreciation and tease that here a little bit?
I definitely do want to talk about our listener appreciation because the numbers are just staggering. I mean, it's beyond either of our beliefs. So yes, and it's going to happen in December. It's going to happen at a pizza place. It'll probably happen on a Saturday late afternoon, but we're trying to figure out the date. So I promise next one we will have a hard date and we'll figure out a way if people want to RSVP or just show up, and it should be a lot of fun. And I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, the excuse to eat pizza with our friends. How bad is that?
Yeah, it's a great deal. But if you missed the last episode, to go back that real fast again. So we had the third generation. So we actually had my esteemed son join us. And I don't know what he is. He's 29 years old. So he's kind of in that young millennial or older Gen Zer. But you could definitely tell his points of view when it comes to sports, and he's very knowledgeable when it comes to sports history and those kinds of things. But he definitely has some very strong opinions and takes as far as the sports world. And I just want to ask you real fast before we get going on today's topic, Steve. But how did you find the interaction, and what did you think of just high level some of the things that my son had to say?
Well, I loved it, and your son's a very cool guy, and I like him, and I like his son also, your grandson Maverick. But one of the things I miss, and actually not one of the things, maybe the thing I miss most about my work is my interaction with people that age. So, when I retired, I was about 60, but we had attorneys in the office who were in their probably 26, 27 was the youngest, a lot of 30 somethings. And it's fun to look at their point of view. I mean, Nathan believes in his heart that there's a conspiracy, and it's great. He grew up in a different era than I did, and I think and the whole point of the show, which was your creation, was that we would in fact have three viewpoints. In 2024, we'll have that third viewpoint more often. But yeah, I thought it was great. I like listening to him. As with people of his generation, I don't always agree, but I like their energy. I like their passion. So I thought it was a great time.
Yeah, and then I'll just leave it with this, which is Reddit seems to be, one of those areas of sources of information and debate that folks, younger than me are engaging in. And then that debate and that source of information is taken almost as gospel, as fact. And I think that is something where even I, like you, I think we really relied upon print. We relied on magazines, books, newspapers. And although I have transitioned as have you, it's quite a bit different when you're growing up in that, kind of environment. So very, very interesting. But today's show, I've been, not that I don't look forward to every single show. I do. I absolutely do. But when you threw this topic out, one person absolutely came to mind. And I don't know if this person qualifies for today's topic, but I will submit it as a possibility. But with that, as always, give the listeners kind of a preview of what today is. Wow, if you're playing something, I cannot hear it.
Oh, that's too bad. I'm playing a song called 96 Tears by Question Mark the Mysterians. And our topic today is one-hit wonders. So those of you who know me, And those of you who don't know me, I'll tell you, it's a tough choice between which I like better, music or sports. And I'm locked into 60s music. I love 60s music. I could listen to it all day. On a road trip, I'll just, get either 60s at 6 on Sirius or my own playlist and listen to it happy as a clam. And the 60s had a boatload of bands that had one hit, one solid hit. If I played it for you, if I knew how to do technology better, I could play it for you. You guys would say, oh, I know that song. I've heard that song a million times. And then nada, bupkis. They got zero after that. And it always has intrigued me how you could have one big hit, one monster hit, and this is back in AM radio, get, maybe sell 500,000 singles, and then nothing. And the same concept applies to sports. There are people who we used to call them flash in the pans, mercurial. I mean, they would come on the scene and dominate for a real short period of time. And I think rather than talking about it abstractly, I'll just give you in my mind, the one hit wonder of Major League Baseball is no other than the Bird, Mark Fidrych. He came out of nowhere. He had this funky delivery, had this mop of hair. He was very funny. He was kind of a country bumpkin, but in a smart, funny way. And he dominated. I'm pretty sure he started the All-Star game as a rookie, and he got guys out, and they could not hit him. They could not figure him out. And if you watched him, his delivery is not so herky-jerky like Kershaw's or Lincecum's that you think, well, he's never going to make it. You thought, this guy's going to be a 20-game winner for 15 years, and he's going to win Cy Young Awards. He'll be in the Hall of Fame. And I'm not positive, but I don't think he did anything after his rookie year. And to me, the concept of that is just so bizarre. And I thought we could talk about it, how people became one-hit wonders and why they became one-hit wonders. And, in music, you can keep cutting songs and you can keep putting out albums they don't sell, but you keep doing it. Sports, I think Fidrych was out of baseball years later. I mean, just a few years later. So he's my poster boy for one-hit wonders. What do you think?
So Mark Fidrych, just a tad bit before my time. So he was, as Steve mentioned, he's Rookie of the Year in 1976. He actually finishes second in Cy Young to the venerable, commensurate professional, I don't know, quite frankly, possibly the face of Major League Baseball during the entirety of his career for 20 years, but Jim Palmer. So Jim Palmer wins the Cy Young. Fidrych leads the league in ERA, leads the league in complete games with 24, and he leads the league in ERA plus at 159. Of course, I love to throw in the advanced metrics. If you want to look at the advanced metrics, though, looking at Mark Fidrych today, so he was 21 years old in 1976. He made it to his age 25 season, and he only pitched in 9 games. In fact, his last 3 years in the league, he only appeared in 3, 4, and 9 games, respectively. But if you look at his advanced metrics, you'd go, this guy was, he had an amazing year, and you could say maybe even lucky, but it probably was going to portend to, maybe not as great success, but a modicum of success, or just be mediocre. But that's a great throw out. And prior to this show, we talked about another guy, and I did an extra time show on the Cleveland Indians during my lifetime. So from 1972 to 1993, the Clevelands, I said Indians, and I apologize wow. I mean, normally I'm the one who's the calling the alarm on that, but the Clevelands franchise from 1972 to 1993, their best finish was 4th, which I believe they did 3 times, if I have the numbers correct. Their average finish was 6th. They were terrible. They only had something like 3 or 4 All-Stars, Jim Kern being one of them, the pitcher. But I want to say, was it 1980? But they had a Rookie of the Year and a guy named Super Joe Charboneau. Did I say his name right?
Super Joe, that's right.
And he just came, kind of like Fidrych, he just kind of came out of nowhere. And then that was it. I mean, he was age 25. Yeah, you had it right, 1980. 1980, 81, and 82 out of the league. Done. Gone. So you want to talk about those one-hit wonders. I mean, he was in and out. He had 23 home runs, 87 RBI, and, solid 289 batting average. He had a slugging of 488, and he had an OPS plus of 129. So he was 29% better than the average major leaguer that year as a rookie. And then very quickly he was done. So yeah, these guys that come out and they're amazing, and then they're gone.
Well, in baseball, it's interesting because typically in baseball, especially if they're a position player, it's not injuries. It's not anything, really bad. Although as I'm speaking about it, there is a Brooklyn Dodger who was fantastic, a guy named Pete Reeser. And he was considered a superstar, but he kept crashing into fences, making catches, and he knocked himself out of the league. He was never the same. But that's different because baseball players just can't have it. So another, I know we're switching gears a little bit, but another one-hit wonder that is probably near and dear to you because he went to Fresno. He's from Fresno. And I know your sister, one of our biggest fans, lives near Fresno and is a huge Bulldog fan, even though he didn't go to Fresno State. He went to UNLV, but Icky Woods hit the scene. And I think I have it right. I think his rookie year, he had some amazing amount of touchdowns. I want to say 13 or 15. He tore the league up. He just really did. People remember him for the Icky Shuffle, but he was fantastic. And he was gone. He was gone 2 years later. Now, he was gone because running backs have very short shelf lives in the NFL. And all it takes is one tough tackle and you're done. And he had 15 touchdowns his rookie year, and he led the league with 5.3 yards per carry. And he was on the infamous Bengals team that lost to the Niners in the Super Bowl, the famous, Joe Montana, John Candy, last drive, John Taylor. And he was great. He was a great player. He had Pete Johnson blocking for him, which is a big help. But he was great. And you would just think, wow, this guy is going to be an all-pro for, I realize running backs don't last that long, but 5-6 years is not uncommon. But he was gone. He was done, and he was out of football 2 years later. So I think Icky Woods should be on our one-hit wonder team.
Absolutely. You said John Candy. I'm assuming you do not mean the Second City former funny man. I'm assuming, were you meaning Joe Montana?
Don't you know the story?
John Candy?
John Candy. So they're on the 12-yard line or whatever at the last drive. And
Dwight Clark.
I'm sorry. I said John Taylor. I meant Dwight Clark. So they're on the who did he throw the touchdown pass to against Cincinnati?
The first time or the second time?
The first time. That was John Taylor, but I could be wrong. But anyways,
John Taylor. Yes, you said Candy.
No, but I'm getting to John Candy. So they're in the huddle, and it's a TV timeout. So I don't think it was a 2-minute drive. It was probably 3.5 minutes. And it was clear that if they didn't score a touchdown, they lose. And as they're waiting for the TV timeout to finish, Joe Montana looks over and says to Randy Cross, "Hey, that's John Candy on the sidelines." And apparently it loosened everyone up so much, like, wow, this guy notices John Candy. So yeah, that's the mention I was talking about.
So for 1988, for that season, Icky Woods, yes, John Taylor. That's the second time. So because remember they went in 82 against Ken Anderson, and then 88 was Boomer Esiason. But that's a good one. Here's one that I submit. This isn't my curveball for you, but here's one that I submit. And is this considered a one-hit wonder, or is it more of a flash in the pan? But he's like, I will tell you, I was caught up in all of it. I thought it was amazing. I'm a huge fan of his, even though that, I'm not making fun of it, but he very much wears it on his sleeve. He's he's very much, very Christian, and he's open about it. And, I tend to be, hey, do your thing. That's cool. No problem on my end, but, keep it to yourself kind of thing. But I'm a big fan of his, and it was just, the mania was amazing. But Linsanity, Jeremy Lin.
Oh yeah, Linsanity is definitely a one-hit wonder, and Jeremy Lin, and the viewers or listeners might want to know that you have a Jeremy Lin jersey that you wear from time to time. And
Absolutely.
yeah, Jeremy Lin was it. Jeremy Lin had it going. I saw the game I saw the game on television at Madison Square Garden where he took on Kobe, and he took the last shot and he made it. And everyone in the building knew he was going to make it. I mean, that's just how it was. So yeah, Jeremy Lin was one of these guys for that finite amount of time. He played out of his head, and it was just amazing. And unfortunately, I think race had a good chunk to do with it, but he couldn't replicate it. It just wasn't going to happen. But for that period of time, he was. I mean, Jeremy Lin, when he went to Harvard, he wasn't that good. He was. I mean, Harvard obviously is kind of Division I, but they're certainly not known for their basketball players. And he bounced around, and he was a guy who could shoot it, but he never really got the chance, et cetera, et cetera. But talk about seizing the moment when he had his thing going, and Madison Square Garden went berserk. The whole league went berserk, and it was fun. It was fun to watch. But and although he toiled, he played a number of seasons, and he played overseas, and he kept trying. And I think he's even on was he on the Warriors G team a couple years ago? I mean, he got to give the guy credit, but in my mind, he's a one hit wonder. Not a knock on him at all, but he had one magical year, and then it went away.
Yeah, and Jeremy Lin, I mean, he was actually a Warrior prior to, so he was on their two-way squad or whatever you want to call it. The Warriors cut him. I believe he was also, before he actually went to the Rockets on the poison pill deal, I believe he was a Rocket as well. And then, he goes and has the run. And then he plays as a solid bench player. He won a title with Toronto. So he didn't play very much or at all in the series finals, but he was on the Kawhi Leonard Toronto Raptors team. So he did, get a chip there. But you talk about these one-hit wonders, and I guess the other piece of it too is, and maybe not necessarily one-hit wonders, but I'm also amazed at the guys that are solid, but they have that one amazing year. And so are those guys one-hit wonders? And I know you had somebody on that we had kind of discussed previously that kind of fits that mold. He was a solid player, but he had the one amazing year.
Yeah, my brother and I used to talk about this a lot. When something great would happen, we'd call it the Norm Cash syndrome, because Norm Cash was a first baseman for the Tigers. I think he was from Port Arthur, Texas. He passed away this year. Really good athlete who went play baseball, big guy, and he could hit the ball, and he had a solid career. If I had to make a guess, and this is a total guess because I have not actually looked anything up, but I would guess he's probably a 280 hitter for his career with some ding to his power. He probably had 25 home runs a year. In 1961, he hit 361. I mean, unbelievable. I mean, it's like he was like he stepped out of a phone booth and had a Superman jersey on. I mean, it was crazy. He hit so high above his average ever. No one could figure it out. So when anyone has a good, season and they haven't really done it again, to me, my brother and I would always call it Norm Cash, because it was just so funny. It was so out of character. And if I remember correctly, I know we talked about this. I think Joe Torre did the same thing. I mean, one year, Joe Torre was a good, solid player, and I think a great announcer, color man. I'm not sure you're supposed to use the word color man anymore, but that's what they called it. And a good manager, really good manager. I mean, he managed all the insanity of the Yankees with class. He handled Steinbrenner. He seemed like the kind of guy that if you met Joe Torre, super nice man. And he was an all-star. He was a good player. But one year, I think he hit 350 and was like, how could Joe Torre hit 350? You got to figure he got no infield singles. I mean, he just, he couldn't run. So he did not hit any ground balls deep to short and beat out the throw. He hit shots. He hit line drives to the outfield, and he hit 350 one year. And that was way, way out of his comfort zone. And no one really understood how it happened. And the nice thing about this, because I know we'll get to Brady Anderson at some point. This is before steroids. This is before people say, "Oh yeah, well he was juiced up." Joe Torre wasn't juiced up. Norm Cash wasn't juiced up. They just had everything go right for a season. Very solid, good players who played a combination of Willie Mays and Mickey Mantle for one whole 162 games, which is kind of amazing.
So there's a couple guys that I always think of in this vein. Derek Lee being one of them, former Marlin, former Chicago Cub in 96, or excuse me, in 2005. Pardon me, I was jumping ahead to someone else, but in 2005, which I don't know if you want to say that is beginning on the downside of the steroid era. I mean, at that point, Mitchell report was already out. We were starting to know more about some of this stuff. There had already been some suspensions. Maybe this is the tail end. I mean, he always had some solid years, but Derek Lee in 2005 had 199 hits, led the league in hits, 50 doubles, led the league in doubles, 46 home runs. He's in the top 20 in all-time total base hits in a single season. Had 121 runs, 107 RBI, batted .335, led the league in slugging at .662, led the league in total bases at .393. And for the rest of his career, he would not, I mean, his next highest is 308 total bases in a season. So he'd never, kind of like Norm Cash, he just had that 1 year out of nowhere. And then the other 1 year like that I would submit, which is just an insane season. And this one might be more relative to the park that he played in. But Ellis Burks in 96 with Colorado, he would lead the league in runs with 142 runs. He would have he would be second in hits with 211, 45 doubles, 8 triples, 40 home runs, throw in another 128 RBI, stole 32 bases, led the league in slugging at .639, and you'd have 392 total bases. It's one of the greatest seasons in Major League Baseball history that nobody talks about. And it's just this kind of rando season that's there for Ellis Burks. And it's just like, wow. And, you know, is that the rarefied air of Colorado? Is it the lucky of the season? Is it he was one of the early guys? You know, I don't want to cast any dispersions that he's one of the early guys on the juice, but I'm always just fascinated, you know, Norm Cash, since he's well before either of those guys, the Norm Cash effect.
Yeah, it's funny. So do you know what team in Major League Baseball has had the most Rookie of the Years?
Well, the Dodgers and the A's have both had big runs where they've had like 3, 4, 5 in a row. So all time, I'm going to go with the Dodgers.
Yeah, I didn't know if that's right, but I'm confident enough. But the Dodgers had a guy, and I'm not sure. I'd be surprised if you even knew this guy. I remember him from being a kid, and he was the precursor to Bill Russell and Ron Say. His name was Billy Grabakowitz, and everyone called him Grabby. And we were like in 6th grade or 5th grade. We'd joke, yeah, he's a little grabby. Then you'd grab someone's butt and pinch them, and you know it was a joke. But his second season, he was an all-star, solid numbers. And this is in 1970, so they don't have a lot of, you know, pop to the bats. Almost 290 average, 17 dingers, and 84 ribbies for a middle infielder. And you just expected this guy to, you know, back then the Dodgers, you know, they got locked in and they'd have a position player for a decade. And he was like the guy everything was built around. And he never had a season even close to that. And I think probably in 71 or 72, Russell and Lopes and Say came around, and he was out. He was out of baseball. And it was one of these things where, you know, you just think, wow, your second season in the bigs, you're an all-star middle infielder. You've got a lot of pop to your bat. And what happens? And, you know, I don't think anyone knows the answer. I mean, you know, it just doesn't make sense to have a season that good. I mean, there are obviously answers that we don't know. I mean, people have mental health issues, people have dope issues, people have, you know, all kinds, you know, personal crises. And then, you know, then I'm of the opinion that a lot of times these guys are operating at this level that is real high. And when they're operating at 98%, they're all-stars. And when they're operating at 96%, they're average. And when they're operating at 92%, they're out of the league. And the margin for error is that small. So maybe just one of those seasons where everything came together. But he's a young guy. I mean, you know, Ellis Burks and Derek Lee, they'd been around the league for a long time. They no one expected them to do it just like Norm Cash, but they were experienced players. Billy Grabakowitz, man, you know, people expect him to have a 15-year career, and he was out of baseball very shortly. So to me, it's just it's a very funny, I say funny, caustically topic. And I think the same thing in music. I mean, it just blows me away to hear a great song like Baby It's You by a band called Smith, or Double Shot of My Baby's Love by the Swinging Medallions, or Judy in the Skies by John Fred and the Playboy Band. These are like these dance songs that just come flying out of the radio. They're fantastic, but they don't have anything else. So I mean, maybe that's as good as it gets. Maybe that's, they're one. I mean, like some of these guys, they have one great painting, right? They paint a masterpiece and the rest of their stuff is schlock. And in sports, they keep playing and you watch their stats and they go down and down and down and down. But do you remember a guy named Bobby Crosby?
I was just about to say Bobby
Yeah.
Crosby and Pat Listach. So both
Right.
of those guys came out of the, both won Rookie of the Year. Crosby with the A's. I think he had 24 home runs his rookie year.
Another
Pat
middle
Listach,
infielder. Yeah.
Yeah, Pat Listach was with Milwaukee, also won Rookie of the Year. And then both of those guys were basically out of the league, very shortly after. And then just for our listeners' own edification, yes, I was correct. The Dodgers are number one. They have 18 total Rookies of the Year. And I think that should go without saying, is that, the very first Rookie of the Year and the Rookie of the Year who it's named after is, of course, Jackie Robinson. And he was the first Rookie of the Year in 1947. So that, of course, would track. And then who knows if they're going to be the Las Vegas Athletics, but the Philadelphia/Kansas City/Oakland Athletics have 8. So they are tied for third most Rookies of the Year, just as an FYI. But yeah, Bobby Crosby is another guy. Listach is another guy. I just think it's, there's things that we don't see or know, injuries behind the scenes. We've talked about behaviors off the field or, personal situations that contribute to these types of things. But kind of going back to the music thread, there's songs that just get into the zeitgeist, right? And Eddie Grant with Electric Avenue, Taco, Putting on the Ritz. There's these songs that come out of nowhere, are in the zeitgeist for this very brief period of time. And then for the most part, people forget who they are. I mean, people would call Devo a one-hit wonder with Whip It. Now, I'm a huge Devo fan. I am very familiar with the entire anthology of Devo. But if you want to talk about popular radio, yeah, they're a one-hit wonder. And I think a big part of that is, and I don't know, maybe that's a thread we want to tease on, the record industry and the radio industry for a long time was dirty. I mean, it was pay to play. There was a lot of factors going on how A&R reps were, getting people played or not played. And it really took, the K-Rocks of the world down here, 106.7. It took, and now they're out of Long Island and my brain just went, but out of New York, that, really kind of went in the late 70s, early 80s, 91X down in San Diego, where they started playing some of these other things and going against a lot of the record companies. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting where you have these bands that go to number one, presumably super, super popular, and all of a sudden they just disappear.
Yeah, I think in music, you're right. I think it was very dirty, and there was probably a lot of, they wouldn't play ball or something like that. But do you remember a guy, switching back to baseball? Do you remember a guy named Tony Conigliaro?
Yeah, he was a Red Sox. Didn't he get hit?
Tony Conigliaro was kind of a one-hit wonder in his own way. I think he led the league in home runs at a very young age, like 23 or 24, with the Red Sox, and I think in 65. And yeah, I mean, back then leading the league in home runs was like having 32. But he was the guy. So you got to remember, Boston had a tradition. So they had Ted Williams in left, and then that transition to Carl Yastrzemski, that transition to Jim Rice, and even before that, it was like Dom DiMaggio. I mean, they had these guys, and that was just Fenway. That was the gig. And Tony C was the next guy. He was gonna. I'm not sure if he'd play left next to Yastrzemski or what, but he was the guy. And then against the Angels, a pitcher named Jack Hamilton, a pitch got away up and in, hit him in the eye. And back then, they didn't have the helmet with the flaps. And he was never the same. Now, to his credit, he came back. He came back and tried to play. He actually was with the Angels a couple of years in the late 60s, but he was never the same. He had problems with his depth perception and other things, but he was a guy that same thing. You lead the league in homers when you're 23 years old at Fenway, where you got to really jack it up to get over the Green Monster. And and he was a complete player. He could do a lot. He was very good, and he was young and handsome, and he was kind of the idol of everybody. And it goes away in a flash. And and I know way before your time, there was this pitcher in baseball named Herb Score. He's a left-hander for the Indians. Same deal. He threw. Oh, that's right. He was left-hander for the Clevelands, and I believe he was pitching to Gil McDougald, and McDougald hit a line drive off his head, and he was never the same. And they're expecting. I mean, this was before Sandy Koufax, but they were saying, yeah, he was a left-hander who threw hard, and they envisioned this big career. So kind of the one-hit wonders can be a lot of things. I mean, one, I'd say with a guy like Joe Charboneau, maybe he wasn't that talented. Maybe same with Mark Fidrych. They put together for a year, but the hitters figure out Fidrych, the pitchers figure out Charboneau, and they're average players. But some of them, the mercurial ones, the Tony Caniglieros, the Herb Scores, these guys, whether it's Icky Woods or not, they're derailed by injuries. And, unfortunately, their careers are shortened significantly, which to me just makes it far more fruitful and satisfying to see the guys. I mean, the Eddie Murrays of the world. I was not a huge Eddie Murray fan just because I had a buddy who played minor league baseball with him, and he said some disparaging things, but that just could have been jealousy. But I mean, Eddie Murray, showed up every day and he hit the ball. And, you can't argue with his numbers. I mean, I think he's one of the 2 or 3 switch hitters with over 500 dingers. And, he played probably 20, 25 years. And to me, I've always been a fan of the guys who play and play and play and play. Longevity, consistency, professionalism, a little bit. But by the same token, I'm intrigued, certainly more by music, but in sports, of the guys who just show up and put on a show. I mean, Jeremy Lin, was fun to watch. And I mean, he had this run where it's just amazing. And, you got to figure in the NBA, there's a lot of jealousy and shit going on. And I'm sure they were really playing him hard and trying to make sure that we're not going to let this Asian dude beat us. And he beat him every time. And it was just great to watch. And you could see his confidence grow game by game. I don't know if you've ever seen the short doc, Lin Linsanity, but it's great. I mean, this guy did it all, and really in very adverse conditions.
Well, and then I remember the game against the Heat where LeBron and Dwayne Wade just took him out of the game. And you can say that LeBron and Dwayne Wade shut him down, and it's true. And he looked terrible in that game. But you also have to remember the Knicks as a whole were awful. Right. I mean, they're, Carmelo was a shell of whatever Carmelo was. And then you just have this bunch of miscast characters on this team. And Jeremy was only playing because they had so many injuries. I mean, it was like, well, shoot, who do we have left on the bench? And D'Antoni's like, all right, well, Len, get in there. Let's see what happens. So, the fact that he got shut down, yeah, he absolutely did. And they made it tough for him. But, he really didn't have anybody else helping him out on the floor. So I've got another one. You mentioned Herb Score. Herb Score, we used to play this game called Earl Weaver Baseball back when we were kids. And it was one of the very first computer games, where they used historical players. And so we always used Herb Score a lot. And, at that point, it would give us a reason to look up, different players. Score being one of them. He was supposed to be the next Bob Feller, the left-handed Bob Feller. He threw hard. There were people that said that he was the hardest thrower in the league at that time, and he was pretty amazing. But there's another guy, you talk about mercurial. He would end up kind of figuring it out but he was kind of up and down because apparently what I've read about is, he liked to drink hard after games. He liked to chase after the ladies. He was a Cy Young winner. And you probably remember him because he's an original Los Angeles, California
Oh,
Angel of
if
Anaheim.
you're talking about Bo Belinsky, of course. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
Dean Chance.
Oh, well, funny. Dean Chance and Bo Belinsky were,
They were
same
running
size of
mates,
different
right?
coin. They were running mates. Dean was the right-hander, Bo was the left-hander. Bo was like the hardest partier. I mean, they just had pictures of him with every starlet in Hollywood, and he'd make these really inappropriate statements like, yeah, I go home with whichever one I think cooks me the best breakfast. And he threw a no-hitter. He threw a no-hitter one time, and they said if he'd ever tried to channel some of his talent, he would have been great, but he didn't really care that much about baseball. He cared more about partying, way more about partying. Dean Chance was a better player. Dean Chance was a real deal, but Dean Chance also had his issues.
Yeah, so in 1964, he goes 20-9, 165 ERA, leads the league in innings pitched, and he wins Cy Young Award. He would get traded to Minnesota. He would kind of turn it around that first couple of years in Minnesota, but shortly after, he was out of the league. And they used to say that he partied hard, and it was good that he got shipped to Minnesota. And I guess he was quoted as saying, "Yeah, it was good that he kind of got out of that environment." But just too much hard living, catches up to you very fast when you're a professional athlete.
It sure does. It sure does.
So
what's the curveball for me?
So the curveball is a guy that is a Hall of Famer, but I shouldn't say but. He's a 2-time World Series MVP, 1-time season MVP. He leads the career. He has the most career strikeouts, and it's not close. And even some of these other guys today, I don't even think are going to get close because I don't think they're going to have the longevity that this guy had. And he really only has, although the MVP season that he won in 1973, I would contend that his two best years were actually 1969 and 1980. 1980 is the only season that he batted 300 or better, and he batted 300 on the dot. And the season that he won MVP, Will Clark actually had 5 years in a row where he actually had more total bases than the total bases that this player had in 1973. But he is known for kind of his wit, his cockiness, and most importantly, 3 home runs in a World Series in 1977. Reggie Jackson.
I don't quite get how he's a one-hit wonder.
I don't know. Is he a one? I'm not saying that he's a one-hit wonder, but if you really look at his career as a whole, he had some solid years and he played a long time. So his counting numbers are high. And he has not 5 MVPs, but he has 5 World Series rings because, of course, they won 3 in a row with Oakland. And then he won 2 more in a row with the Yankees. But if you really look at his career, it's very strange. It's a very strange career, especially for a Hall of Famer. And I'm not suggesting that he's not a Hall of Famer, but his highs weren't that high. His lows weren't that low either. And he just kind of, you talk about the lunch pail kid that you talk about, the guys that you like, that's what he is. Showed up every day, played a lot of games. Like, he wasn't hurt that much, and he consistently played, quite a few games. Now, granted, later on in his career, he was mostly playing DH, but just not out of this world. And one person might argue, well, his OPS plus, which is his statistics of on base percentage and slugging as compared to the rest of the league, is very good. It's 139. So that means he was 39% better than the league average during his career. But Will Clark was 137, and Will Clark played in the height of the steroid era. And I've done a show where if Ichiro played during the same time period as Pete Rose, his OPS plus would be significantly higher because Ichiro, of course, his career spanned across, that PED era. Is the myth of Reggie Jackson greater than the actual player? And so do we think of him higher or better because of those couple of moments? And so I submit to you, is he maybe not a one-hit wonder, but was he not as great as everyone seems to think he was?
Well, that might be true. That's a very different take on what we're doing today. But my thing about Reggie, and I was never a big fan of Reggie, but I will say Reggie would rise to the occasion. He liked the pressure. He brought it on. And just think of the Yankees. So at the corners, they got Chris Chambliss and Greg Nettles, two very solid players. Neither of them, I don't believe either of them in the Hall of Fame, and I don't think they probably deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. Real solid guys who hit everything, but it was never about them. And if they went 0 for 4, there would be no newspaper articles. If they struck out 3 times, no one would say anything about it. It just kind of did their thing. Reggie was a lightning rod for everything, and to his credit, the brighter the lights, the better he played. And to me, that when you talk about World Series in New York, that's a big deal. And a lot of guys crumble under the pressure, and he did not. And even on the Angels, when he was old, he had clutch hits. He was a player. So yeah, I think the myth of Reggie is a little bigger when you look at the cold hard numbers than it is. But he's a Hall of Famer, and he's a very solid player. And that's just all of it. Getting back to hoops, this is a Sacramento guy, and I'll give Sacramento a little shout out because one of my favorite songs, More Today Than Yesterday, is by the Spiral Staircase. Spiral spelled not like Spiral, and they're from Sacramento. But do you remember Tyreek Evans?
Of course. He was he Kentucky?
I don't think he was Kentucky, but he was one and done. I think he was Memphis. And he averaged like 20.
Yes, Memphis.
He averaged like 28 at college. He went in and he just tore up the league. I think as a rookie, he had a line of 25 and 5, which is, 20 points a game, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. That's significant territory, but and you would say once again, hey, this guy's going to be around for a long time. And it just didn't work out for a lot of reasons. I think substance abuse was part of it, but it's one of those things. So I would say he's a one-hit wonder, even though he played a number of seasons and he kept trying, but he never replicated the magic of his rookie year. And rookies in the NBA have notoriously hard times making the transition. A lot of very good players had rough rookie seasons, and some of them barely got off the bench. And he just came in there and dominated, and it just didn't work out. So now, do you remember the guy who was drafted before Steph Curry?
Well, Johnny Flynn and Ricky
Yes,
Rubio
ding.
were
Johnny Flynn, and there you go. So he had actually a pretty good rookie year. His numbers were fine, but he couldn't. I think 2 or 3 years later, he's out of basketball. He's probably playing overseas. So the one-hit wonder to me is just like the music thing, man. They knock it out of the park in the beginning, and then they just can't keep it going. And they try. They cut songs, they do things, but the magic they had was never the same, and it will never be the same.
Christian Okoye.
Yeah.
Kansas City Chiefs. 1989, he led the league in attempts. He led the league in yards. He led the league in yards per game at 1,480. Wouldn't get close. His next highest he did have 1,000 yard. His only other 1,000 yard season would be 2 years later. But at that point, he's 30 years old. And as many people know, once you get that range for running back, there are the very few that actually make it past that. They just can't quite get there.
I'm not sure if this is an appropriate nickname, but his nickname was the Nigerian Nightmare. But I met him, and he was a super nice guy. I went to a pool party with him one time. I mean, I didn't go with him, but I was at a house where it was a pool party. He was there, and people were getting kind of horseplay, playing rough. And he picked up a friend of mine and threw him into the pool. I mean, with so much velocity, the guy just went flying into the deep end. And we're just like, whoa, this guy is strong. So yeah, he was a nice man. He was a good guy. I only talked to him for a few minutes, but I liked him.
But I mean, this concept of both music and for, sports, just the concept of, and then when you look at the fan perspective, you know, I wouldn't mind. Yeah, I'll be a one hit wonder in music. I'll be the 1 year wonder. I'll be the Brady Anderson, the Luis Gonzalez, the Ellis Burks, Norm Cash. Sure, I'll take it on. And when you're the fan looking at it, going, sure, I'll take that, no problem. But when you're that athlete or you're that musician and you are at the height of your profession, and then you can never replicate it again, I have to imagine that can create a lot of, mental health issues and cause people to spiral. And I'm sure there's no shortage of stories that is true for a lot of these, professional athletes and musicians.
Well, I think the takeaway is, you know, you can write a great song and do it, but that doesn't translate to an album, and that doesn't translate to multiple albums. And I mean, obviously, I'm dating myself by saying albums, but it doesn't. I mean, so there's a band called the Rivieras, and they had one hit, "California Sun," which your favorite band, the Ramones, covered, and that was it. So it was a surf song, and it did their thing. So yeah, I mean, I hope our listeners are taking this in the spirit it's given, which is my hat's off to one hit wonders, because just getting there is you've beaten out 99.9% of the people who are trying. But like I say, to me, it's fun to look at the one hit wonders, but it also gives me more just admiration for the Tim Duncans, the guys that are there every day for year after year after year after year. And as a musician, I don't think they lose their chops in their 30s or 40s, but in pro sports, you play. I mean, 12 years in the NBA is a lifetime, 6 years in the NFL is a lifetime. Baseball guys can go a little longer, especially if they're position players, but it's the same deal. So I just thought it'd be a fun topic to talk about. I could, like I say, I could get in the car and play one hit 60s wonders from here to Vegas and not miss a beat. And I like every one of them. And I mean, the thing about music is it's encapsulated, and they got 3 minutes of vibrancy and soul and energy and everything else right there that is immortalized for life. You can go back and look at these guys who played basketball and football and say, yeah, they're pretty good, but music's a little different, and it's fun. It's fun to see, and it's fun to watch, and I just thought it'd be a good topic for us. So anyways, those are my thoughts.
So with that, to finish the show off, give us your top 3 favorite one hit wonder songs, and give us, a couple, 2 or 3 of your favorite one hit wonder players.
Well, the songs would probably be, I like More Today Than Yesterday by Spiral Staircase. For the longest time, I thought it was Stevie Wonder, even though it's a white guy from Sacramento singing, but it's a great song. I like Baby It's You by a band called Smith, which, it was this band of guys. They kind of put this group of LA studio people together, and they really expect them to be a super group. One hit and nothing. Although they were on Easy Rider. They had a song on Easy Rider. And then the story is Gail McCormick, the lead singer, she ended up like working at a Macy's in Nashville or something. So that's kind of intriguing. And then it's kind of hard to say. I like 96 Tears by Question Mark, the Mysterians. And I also like some real obscure ones like The Cheater by Bob Kubin, who was like a high school teacher. And those are good. But clearly my favorite one hit wonder players, it's gotta be Jeremy Lin, because I really like Jeremy Lin. I will always stand with my Norm Cash analogy, even though very few people get it and it's probably completely dated. But I like Norm Cash, and I don't know. I can't really think of. I mean, Icky Woods, Peyton Mills, running backs that get hurt. I mean, I look at them a little differently. So I'd have to give it some thought to think of another one and wonder. How about you?
So just before I jump into that, Norm Cash, 1961, age 27. He leads the league in hits. He bats 361 to lead the league. He leads the league in on-base percentage at 487. And he has 41 home runs and 132 RBI. It is his only season that he bats over 300. And not only
Unbelievable.
that, his second highest full season batting average is only 286. So he bats almost 80 points higher than his previous career high. And he was always solid, not spectacular, but he had that 1 year. But if we're talking music, I look at the music, the one-hit wonders aren't necessarily my favorite songs, but the one-hit wonder opened me up to the band. And so I became a big fan of the band, and they have other songs that I like much better than the one-hit wonder. So the aforementioned Devo with Whip It, not necessarily their best song. It's a fine song, but you know, if you really look at, and it's probably not, I mean, the way that it's done to kind of hold a mirror up to society. So it's not done in a derogatory way, but you know, their first album, Are We Not Men? We Are Devo, and you know, they have Mongoloid as one of the songs that is on there. But you know, everyone knows Whip It. That was the one-hit wonder. The Buggles with Video Killed a Radio Star. You know, I would call that a one-hit wonder. And, you know, it launched MTV, and that launched a lot of great music memories for me. And then Flock of Seagulls, I Ran. A lot of people, you know, that's their favorite song by Flock of Seagulls. It's actually not mine. Wishing is my favorite song, but if it wasn't for I Ran, I would have never found Flock of Seagulls. And then when we talk about those one-hit wonders, that Ellis Berg season I've talked about many times on the Extra Time show, that 1996, Ellis Burks would end up becoming a Giant, you know, and my friend was a Red Sox fan as a kid. So when Ellis Burks came up, you mentioned the left field chronology of Dom DiMaggio, Ted Williams to Yastrzemski to Jim Rice, then Mike Greenwell. So my friend was a big Mike Greenwell fan, and Burks and he came up at the same time with the Red Sox. So, and then Burks would later on be a Giant. And I'm not a big fan of his, but the season is just amazing. And, you know, there's a lot of innuendo around it, of course, but the Brady Anderson 50 home run season is just, you know, if you take it in a vacuum and you kind of clear out all the noise of the, was he using, was he not using, and all the other things around, you know, there's a lot of innuendo around Brady Anderson's proclivities. But that in itself, that season where he's a guy that I think that you can root for, tough player, just comes to the park every day, does his thing, and he has an amazing year. And if you can just get behind that part of the story, it's an amazing story. But then, of course, number one is Jeremy Lin. I mean, just Asian American. You know, my father's from the Philippines, my great grandfather's from China. So being able to see someone, you know, as close to me as possible in the NBA excelling, we don't have a whole lot of that. Like it doesn't, you don't see that. It's very intermittent. I mean, people go, what about Yao Ming? Yao Ming, right? He had a handful of seasons, then he was done. He was hurt. But those were really my favorites. But I was really glad that you brought this topic up, and I look forward to announcing the date for our listeners. So again, we are going to have a party, and that party is going to be a pizza party, and it's at a really cool place. It's got a neat sky deck here in Ventura, California. So we are not paying for your travel to get here, but we will definitely treat you to pizza and some beverages. And we thank all of you. We are well over 1,200 listens now. And when we first started this, my goal was to have one person listen that we didn't know. And we've definitely well surpassed that. So I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. But that's it for me. I'm Jonathan. I'll let you take it away there, Steve.
You guys have a good night, and we will come up with some more things to talk about. Ciao.